This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative, scalable and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
New Icy Hot. Nighttime recovery. Relieves pain at nighttime while your body recovers. Icy Hot. You're so back.
When the WNBA formed and there was a New York team playing at Madison Square Garden, it was electric. It was just unbelievable. I could talk about it forever, but it was incredible to go to this like iconic arena in New York City and have this huge crowd of people, and people being like tons of lesbians, and then also straight people and young children all cheering for women. And that felt like really, to me, revolutionary. And it was this incredible atmosphere of like all of us, you know, in celebration of something that was about women and really about queerness and lesbians. And it was that part, the queer part and the lesbian part, that was totally closeted, not spoken. The New York Liberty would often play on Gay Pride Day in New York, and there'd be like the parade happening outside, and then you'd go into the arena and there would be no mention at all of what was happening outside the walls of Madison Square Garden. At that point, none of the players were out. There was no acknowledgement by the league, and they really were kind of branding it as like a kind of family and really heteronormative family event. They had games like at, you know, halftime or timeouts that were for mom, dad, and the kids. Like they really were kind of marketing it, you know, as a space for like hetero families to attend, and really without any attention to the elephants in the room of just like who was on the court, who was in the stands. And it was just overwhelmingly lesbian.
So the WNBA formed in 1996. This is inherently lesbian-centered, right? Like the fans, the players, not that everyone involved was a lesbian, but many were. What we're talking about today is how, for years and years, there was this disconnect between how the league was marketing itself and the actual reality of the lesbians behind the scenes and in the stands. You just heard one of our guests today, Jess Dobkin, referring to that very thing. Jess is an activist and performance artist. Living in New York in the 90s, she was part of ACT UP and the Lesbian Avengers, an activist group focused on lesbian visibility. Using all those tools, eventually she would form a group called Lesbians for Liberty. Now, the New York Liberty was one of the original teams to play in the WNBA. Today, they play at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, but in the beginning, and for many years, their home games were at Madison Square Garden. That's where our story is set today. In our first act, Jess and her comrade, Lisa DeBoer, are going to tell us all about their fight for lesbian visibility in the WNBA with this group, Lesbians for Liberty, and then how they actually just this past summer got some long overdue recognition for their efforts by the Liberty themselves. Then in Act 2, we're going to get a bit more of Jess's story as we discuss her absolutely fascinating history of performance art and how that's all intertwined with her activism. I don't want to give too much away, but her art involves very cool things like breast milk and tampon insertion. We're going to get to all of that fun stuff later, but first, Lesbians for Liberty and the WNBA.
I found out about the Lesbian Avengers because Sue Friedrich, who was one of the early founding members of the Lesbian Avengers, like I was still at university. I was about to graduate, Sue came to campus showing her films. And I hung out with her after, and I told her that I was going to be going back to New York after school. And she was like, there's something happening. There's something brewing in New York, this Lesbian Avengers, when you come back to New York, come to the community center. And that was in the summer of 1992 when the Avengers were starting. And we really had these incredible kinds of ways of finding each other through word of mouth, through our phone trees, through our lovers and ex-lovers. And the Lesbian Avengers was a direct action group focused on social justice and lesbian kind of centered issues.
Lesbian visibility and survival.
Yeah.
That's the tagline.
Would you say that the Lesbian Avengers was sort of an offshoot of ACT UP? Like there's a lot of overlap.
I don't know that I would use the word offshoot because that implies that it was directly linked.
This is Lisa DeBoer, another activist and a scholar, also part of Lesbian Avengers and Lesbians for Liberty. In this conversation, try to remember that the tone to Lisa's voice is lower than Jess's.
There was definitely a lot of overlap. People who were in ACT UP were also in the Lesbian Avengers.
And it's this group with sort of similar values but focused on lesbian issues and visibility. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, there's definitely Venn diagrams of all of this.
There was also a lot of overlap with the women's movement, the feminist movement, civil rights movement. There were people who had been involved for a long time in those different organizing movements.
What were some of the things that you did with the Avengers?
We did a lot of different kinds of actions. Some were one-time short actions and some were longer political organizing. There was a whole political organizing project around the statewide anti-gay propositions in Idaho in 1994. There was an action in Queens about the anti-gay efforts against the rainbow curriculum in schools, where the anti-gay movement was trying to say you can't teach anything about gay people to children. Meaning you couldn't just say Heather has two mommies. That was do not say that. And so the Avengers did an action outside of school and had balloons and wore t-shirts that said, I was a lesbian child. And so there was a focus on visibility, just being hey, we are here. We exist.
And that was in the 90s, that action and that issue?
Yeah, that was in 1992. Yeah. And I also remember I lived in New York and I remember just walking down the street in the village and seeing this. It was a little shrine that was set up to these two people who had been killed. Anti-gay violence. These people had been killed. The firebomb had been thrown in their house. And the Lesbian Avengers were there holding this shrine in their memory and talking about them. And I was just wow, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. And they're just you just walk down the street and there it is. There they are. The Lesbian Avengers were really making things accessible to people and being visible, just making things happen.
In these circles, were people talking about the WNBA and this weird family branding?
Oh, definitely. People were talking about that because we were all there. We were just all at the games and then we'd see each other at parties or we'd see each other at other meetings for other activist things that we were doing. And, for several years in a row on Gay Pride Day, it was oh, it's Gay Pride. Are you going to the parade? Oh, are you going to the game? We would just go from one to the other. And then we get to the game and it was oh, right. They're not talking about that here for several years in a row. But meanwhile, we were going to lots of games. Lots of people had season tickets. And so we knew that oh, it was Father's Day event. Oh, it was, the New York Aquarium Day. We love the aquarium, but it's also Gay Pride Day. Why could they not say it? And the players were not out. And, people knew the players. People knew. It wasn't a secret.
I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I recently saw the Diana Taurasi documentary. And in it, Taurasi talks about the pressures and the pressure on her as a player to act straight, wear makeup. And even when we were kind of confronting the New York Liberty and the league about this, it wasn't like oh, why are they so closeted? It's like they were so scared. The league was so new, and they were so afraid that if the league was seen as a lesbian space, that the league wouldn't survive, that they needed to market it as a straight environment and a straight game, that people wouldn't come, straight people wouldn't come to the games, that sponsors wouldn't sponsor the league if there was that much lesbian visibility.
Are there other elements of this that haven't been mentioned as far as the lesbian erasure? Like I was reading something about on the cams, they weren't showing lesbians.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, in terms of the way that Jumbotron was working, in terms of announcements that they would make, in terms of the games that they would have at halftime, and where people from the stands would come on the court to shoot some hoops and those sorts of things. And there was no acknowledgement of the queers being there. I mean, I also, just putting it in context, I feel like Ellen DeGeneres' coming out on TV is often used as a kind of marker of progress. And it was really around that time. So kind of widening the lens for a minute in terms of thinking about lesbian musicians or it wasn't really just specific to the WNBA. It was a time of intense homophobia. And I think really tied into the kind of, the league trying to establish itself and get the sponsors and funding and all of that. And also so new for women's sports, 1997, 1998, the playoffs or whatever was there was one game that was the championship game that would be two teams with the best season record would play, and that would determine the champion. There was no best out of 5 playoff season. It was a one game, and then it would expand to best 2 out of 3. It's the league has also grown so much, and also in the context of queer activism, because it did really, for me, even the Lesbians for Liberty come out of ACT UP, and then Queer Nation was formed by people that came out of ACT UP. And then in New York, there was the Pink Panthers.
What are the Pink Panthers?
So the Pink Panthers were a civilian patrol in New York of queers who were responding to a lot of gay bashing and anti-gay violence. So the Pink Panthers would be outside of gay bars to if you needed a walk to the subway, they patrolled cruising spots. And so it was all kind of part of this time of things happening at the community center. And then when we did Lesbians for Liberty, really kind of coming out of that energy and those strategies that we had been working with in earlier organizing.
So the Pink Panthers were patrolling the streets.
Yeah. And they had their pink berets, and they would do trainings to kind of take on this role. And if I remember right, there was a phone number that you could call if you wanted an escort, and they would patrol kind of cruising areas as well, because there was anti-gay violence and gay bashings that would happen. I think a lot of that was around the West Village where they patrolled, but I think they also did some in Central Park and some of other cruising spots too, maybe around the piers.
And I feel like you're talking about there just being queer erasure and obstacles permeating society, but what's so unique about the Liberty Games is that the entire entity is overrun by lesbians, and it's so tangible, yet it's not being acknowledged. Do you have an estimate? And it's okay if you don't feel confident in this at all, but I would love an estimate of the percentage of fans in the stands that were lesbian and the percentage of players. How prominent was this?
In terms of the fans, you couldn't turn around without seeing lesbians. They were everywhere, but there was also a lot of straight people too. It was a huge mix of people. But the number of lesbians was definitely not small. It's not like, oh, there's one or two. It's like, oh, there's one. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's one. Oh, I know her. I know her. I know her.
Very significant presence. And part of what was so amazing and felt so special about that space is that it was like a really mixed space, that it wasn't just a lesbian space, but it was very rare at that time too for lesbians to be in a space with, straight families, children. Like it really, it was, you could get a ticket for $8. So it was a really accessible event, and it was really racially diverse. It was really incredibly like affordable and fun. And at this time where I felt like still it was like for lesbians and queers to be around children. And yet it was this space where we were really all together.
Do you remember Joan Jett was at a lot of the games, and she would have courtside seats? And so we'd be like, oh, there's Joan Jett.
That's so cool.
And they would play like one of Joan Jett's songs, and everyone would be like, yeah. And even Joan Jett wasn't, it was really like the elephants in the room. There were many elephants in the room, but that's also something as queers that we were so accustomed to. We knew all of those codes, and we understood that kind of space of what was secret, what was private, like of, seeing people at Henrietta Hudson's, but just being like, oh yeah, there's that celebrity or whatever. There were all these things that we just kind of knew. And now, of course, the elephant in the room is Ellie, which is hilarious to me that like the New York Liberty mascot is now a twerking elephant in the room. So I guess we've come a long way.
Yeah, that's so funny. They like really put an elephant in the room. But so, Jess, is there a backstory to you showing up there with a banner? How did that happen?
So, Gay Pride Day in 1999, the New York Liberty were playing a home game, and the banner said Lesbians for Liberty on it. I think it was kind of in what like Lisa's been talking about too, this frustration of just wanting lesbian visibility in the room and acknowledgement of our presence, especially on Gay Pride Day. I think when I made the banner, it did feel quite innocent, I think, in that I was coming from just a place of celebration. I wasn't at that point doing it as like a kind of political action of sorts. It was really just like, for Gay Pride Day, celebrating that it's Pride and being Lesbians for Liberty, and just to acknowledge this massive, dyke fan base at the Garden. It was a cloth banner, like made out of a white bed sheet that I painted on. I think it would take like a couple people to hold. And I was told that I needed to take the banner down by security guards, that I couldn't show it, that I would be ejected from the arena. And I was surprised, honestly, like it felt I was kind of naive almost about it. People would bring banners. It wasn't that it was unusual to have a sign or a banner. And so the fact that they told me that I needed to take mine down when there could be other banners that are not lesbian specific that could be shown. So I was actually surprised at the reaction at that time.
Did you have people holding it with you?
My friends who were sitting with me, yeah. And then a security person came over and told me that I'd have to take it down. And we were like, why? And I think there was a little bit of a moment of us being like, but we want to hold our banner. And then I was told that if the banner didn't come down, that I would be expelled from the game. And so I just put it in my bag. It was a fabric banner. For that to happen on Gay Pride Day, to kind of have that lesbian visibility censored and squashed. And also it was in the audience and the players, but also like the coaches, the training staff, like the other people behind. I mean, like in any women's sports, there were so many lesbians involved in the whole operation. And so after that game, we kind of, huddled and then organized an action at the beginning of August in New York where they were playing a home game. And that was kind of a Lesbians for Liberty like action where we brought the banner back. We brought other like stickers and flyers. And even before that, we kind of were really creating like an action and energy around it. And I think what was so great was that there already existed this sort of network of us and strategies and practices that came out of all of this other organizing, out of ACT UP, out of the Avengers, out of Queer Nation. And so, yeah, at the beginning of August, there was another home game that was going to be broadcast, I think, on NBC. And we organized to bring the banner back again.
Do you remember hearing about this, Lisa?
Yeah, I think I was there the second time when Jess and maybe some other people carried the banner around during the breaks, like maybe it was during halftime, like around the whole arena so that everybody could see it during halftime, not during gameplay.
I had made stickers and paper fans that we handed out to people, and also just like an information sheet to people to kind of explain to people like what we were doing and why.
Once the initial sort of like talking began, pretty soon we were having meetings at the Lesbian and Gay Center on 13th Street and talking about what to do. And we did things like reaching out to management of the Liberty to talk to them about it, to say, hey, what's up with this? Why is there no acknowledgement? Why not have a lesbian and gay day when you've got it happening on Pride? Some of the people actually like made phone calls and were told like, well, we're not going to do that. That's not what we're going to do. So that's when we were like, okay, we're going to step it up then because this is not working. And we have all this experience in direct action. So we want to make ourselves visible. Like they're trying to ignore us. They're trying to closet us. We are not going to do that. After the efforts to talk with the management really just failed and we hit a wall, that's when we decided, well, let's just do a bigger action. And one of the things that had happened was with the kiss cam. So, right, you know about the kiss cams where they do this at sports games where during timeouts, they will zoom in on a couple and like they'll kiss and everybody cheers. And we'd heard that the camera people were told not to put the kiss cam on queer couples. And one time they accidentally did. And when they realized, so then the queer couple kissed and everybody was cheering. And then the camera person kind of like freaked out and actually zoomed in and was like trying to zoom away, but actually zoomed in on them. It was like, it was just like this dramatic, like moment of, oh no, they can see us.
I would love that footage.
I know, right? I don't know the details of where that was, but so we thought, well, this would be perfect because we want to do something that's not going to disrupt the game. Like we were supporting the players. We were supporting the league. We love the WNBA, but we just wanted to be visible and be able to celebrate who we are and be ourselves at the game and not feel like, it's fine that we're there. Just don't say anything about it. So we thought if we do a kiss-in, which was a classic kind of activist action from earlier groups like Queer Nation.
There's like a long-standing history of kiss-ins like this.
Yeah, with ACT UP and Queer Nation, we did kiss-ins.
It's simple, it's easy, and it just shows, look, we're here. This is who we love. This is us. It just speaks for itself. So we had some meetings to organize the kiss-in event. We advertised. This was early internet, maybe even kind of before real internet, I don't know, early internet days. So it was mostly flyers, things like that, signs and banners. We had some courtside seats. Someone was able to get courtside seats so that we could be right up front. We just had our signs and just held them up. And, during every timeout, we just stood up and kissed.
And how many people, what do you mean by we?
I don't know how many people were actually really doing the taking part in the kiss-in, but I was one of the couples that was right up front and was actually so we got some press, like we were right there and we're in a picture that was then like in the Gay City News and like some other press, and it's now just on the internet. But that kind of visibility of an action. That kind of media presence was a big part of the Lesbian Avengers and the way we did actions. It was like, and Lesbian Avengers was definitely like pre-internet stuff, where shaping the way that we're perceived was a big part of the activism. Doing an action that will get that kind of attention and let people see who we are and not hide it and not be able to deny that we exist.
And then what happened after? Like, you get all of this press.
It got a fair amount of attention. There was some articles. There was an article in the New York Times critiquing it and saying, well, sports should just be about sports. And why do the gays have to talk about this stuff? And other people like Kate Clinton wrote an article for The Advocate about, like, we need women's sports and we need to be able to be out. It was the time period where people were still just struggling with just being out was a big deal. Katie Lang had just come out like not that long ago, you know, things like that. Like lots of people just being out was a big deal.
There's something in that, this kind of action that is political and purposeful and also like full of queer joy. And I felt a lot of that with the Avengers as well. Like we were eating fire, you know, it was very performative, you know, it was like handing out balloons to school children. It was so playful and subversive and serious. And also it felt really effective. You know, and whether or not like the WNBA was going to, or the New York Liberty was going to kind of shift their cameras and their attention to us, like it was a way for us to assert whether we get that attention from them or not. It's of us saying we are here and we matter. Also, like as a way to also try to show solidarity with the players, you know, and I really do. And again, seeing that Diana Taurasi documentary, like I really felt for those players who were really in the spotlight, you know, and trying to like make this league happen. And also all of the other kinds of really connected issues around it, like race and racism in terms of the way that the players were paid and like poorly paid, you know, that they were all like working so hard for this short season and then playing overseas or, you know, having their other jobs and careers because the salaries were so low. There's also just like the misogyny and getting to and from games, like their training facilities, what they all did and sacrificed to make the league what it is now. And I think really still haven't gotten the recognition of all of the dues that they played, including being closeted.
Mm-hmm. Which is why, like, part of what you're saying is that there was no demands of, like, you need to come out. It's like, this is something we can do to sort of support this situation, is like make ourselves visible when they couldn't.
I don't know because I was not in conversation with the players, but I think there was just a lot of points of tension around that too. Like if they did experience some of that as pressure, I don't know, and just what they were holding in terms of their position in the league and in this environment. It was really complex, I'll say, you know, and at the end of the day, it was like, you know, again, just blatant homophobia.
Mm-hmm. And were you all tapped into, I think the same year in 1999, the VP and general manager of the Liberty came out?
Oh, yeah, we knew that. I think there was a sense a little bit that like we kind of expected some allyship here, you know, and like we're part of the efforts to like reach out and say, hey, why can't there be a little more recognition from the Liberty management of who's here at your games? And it was really disappointing when we didn't get that at all.
So then what do you remember about Sue Wicks coming out in 2002? That is sort of the documented first player to come out.
I remember she came out in an interview, I think it was in like June or July of 2002. So it was shortly before we did the big kiss in, but after we had already started doing things with the banner. It was exciting. It was like, great, Sue is out. There was also still an awareness like, okay, That's great that Sue is out. There's still so many more people who are not. Now she's the only one. She gets to be the trailblazer, which is awesome. And yet we still have this culture of like, we're going to just not really talk about it. We're going to be a subculture.
And not saying that it was at all easy for Sue to do that, but I think also as like a white lesbian, as a kind of veteran player for younger players in the league, for BIPOC players in the league, and players that maybe didn't have that position that Sue held, it didn't really address the kind of systemic issues, and again, incredible to have that first player come out, but I remember feeling like it didn't yet address the real systemic issues in the league.
How and when did you start feeling a shift towards like embracing, or did you never feel that lesbians being embraced in that space?
I think I started to feel some of it too through women in other sports, seeing players kind of coming out in women's soccer, and like as women's soccer kind of was really taking off. And then I think too, it was what I think I saw happening in the WNBA was also just kind of like parallel to the wider culture in terms of the things that feel like tremendous progress in terms of queer visibility also feel to me very compromised as well, where it's kind of like, okay, well, now that we see that the league is stable and flourishing and, we kind of can now have people come out, we have this corporate sponsorship and it's not threatened by players' sexuality. At the same time, it's kind of what I feel like about gay pride as well, where it's just become this like corporate smorgasbord and it has lost so much of its political purpose. And also as like ticket prices have gone way up from what they were, like I do feel like there's been a shift in the crowd at the games, and the games have a different energy than they did in like 1998 when they were $8 tickets and the league wasn't yet, and women's sports didn't have that following that they have now in mainstream culture.
So there was never a moment where you felt like there was some sort of like victory for Lesbians for Liberty?
Well, it's funny to me this summer where they did the project at Barclays, where they were kind of collecting archival materials and kind of telling that story.
Yeah, so how did that happen?
I just know that I was contacted by Rachel Corbin, who I think was the person who organized it. And Rachel it's part of the Lesbian Herstory archives, and some of the Lesbians for Liberty material is already in the archive at the Lesbian Herstory archive. Rachel is somehow in conversation with the Liberty. They partnered on it together to kind of share that history of Lesbians for Liberty. And it was like, so when Rachel reached out to me, it was with like surprise and delight of just like, wait, what?
So it was the Liberty and the Lesbian Herstory archives celebrating the history of Lesbians for Liberty?
Yeah, they did an exhibit at a game this summer in the lobby where they put pictures from the archives collection of all the different parts of the Lesbians for Liberty. People could come and look at the pictures and the newspaper articles and the other things they had there, including some of the great artwork that Jess made, like the little lesbian fan, which was just like a piece of paper, real simple, but you could fold it up and make it like a fan. So they had that at one of the Liberty games. And then after the game, they moved that exhibit to the Lesbian and Gay Service Center. The Lesbians for Liberty as a group, we didn't last that long. We worked together for a while, but I don't think too much longer after that kiss in action. We didn't keep going. We haven't been pounding on this for 20 years. We were like, okay, we've done what we can. So it's wonderful that now it's become an artifact of history. And I just think it's amazing that the Liberty is so accepting now of LGBTQ people and has pride celebrations, and that there are team members who are out. There was an interview about players who are a couple. It was in the New York Times just recently. It's really wonderful to see them accepting LGBTQ people and also not being afraid to recognize that it wasn't always so accepting.
EveryPlate is a meal delivery service that makes cooking at home so much easier and way more delicious at a price you'll actually love. No meal planning or stressful trips to the store, just easy recipes and high-quality ingredients delivered to your doorstep. From crispy buffalo ranch chicken to caramelized onion smash burgers, their mouth-watering menu features your favorite restaurant dishes. I know you might be asking yourself, is this going to cost a lot? And the answer is no. EveryPlate is actually cheaper than the grocery store, so you can stick to your budget without any surprises. That's the beauty of their everyday low prices. EveryPlate's pre-portioned ingredients give you exactly what you need, how you need it. The right portions make for less mess, which is a total lifesaver on busy nights when cleanup is the last thing on your list. EveryPlate also helps you get in and out of the kitchen in a flash. Quick cook times and easy-to-follow steps put a family-friendly dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. No overthinking required. You should know that 97% of customers surveyed say they would recommend EveryPlate to friends and family, and 98% of customers surveyed say EveryPlate reduces the mental load of meal planning and cooking. 98% also say EveryPlate meals are delicious. I've used EveryPlate. I would recommend it, especially living in Brooklyn. It saves me so much time and money to get these ingredients and recipes delivered directly to me. Try EveryPlate and get $1.99 per meal on your first box. Go to everyplate.com/podcast and use code cruising199 to get started. That's code cruising199 at everyplate.com/podcast to get $1.99 per meal on your first box. Save on deliciously easy recipes with EveryPlate.
If you've shopped online, it's extremely likely that you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes the process from, I think I'm ready to buy, to, I can't wait till it gets here, so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. It gives you a leg up from the very beginning, with hundreds of beautiful, ready-to-go templates to express your brand style, so you don't have to spend time coding a website. Shopify allows you to tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. Plus, they have built-in marketing and email tools to help find and keep new customers, so you can easily spread your brand's word. And did I mention that iconic purple Shop Pay button that's used by millions of businesses around the world? It's the reason why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet. Your customers already know it, love it, and actually use it. If you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. Shopify.com/realm.
Fall is my favorite time of the year, and whenever it comes around, I'm making sure I'm bringing out my softest blankets, I'm making my favorite soups, really any excuse to use my immersion blender, and just generally making small adjustments in my day-to-day life to reflect the coziness and inherent transitional nature of the season. I love switching things up this time of the year, and that can include updating your makeup look. From a simple just gotta get out the door routine to festive fall glam or maybe even a Halloween look, Thrive Causemetics is your go-to for completing any fall look. Plus, every product is 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients that work with your skin, not against it. My personal favorite product that I absolutely recommend adding to your makeup bag if you haven't already is the Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It's the only mascara I wear anymore. I have it in a brown shade, which just feels a little less harsh than a black mascara. And it's a tubing mascara, so it doesn't run or smudge, and it just makes my lashes look so beautiful and long without any clumping. My favorite part, because I got so tired of working hard to get every last bit of makeup off when I was using other mascaras, when it's time to take it off, it just slides right off with warm water. And something I love about Thrive Causemetics is that purchasing their products does more than enhance your own glow. With every purchase, Thrive Causemetics makes a donation to numerous causes, and they've given over $150 million in product and cash donations to more than 600 giving partners, so it really is beauty with purpose. Whether you're doing a total overhaul or just making the tweaks in your life to feel in line with the season, complete your fall look. Go to thrivecausemetics.com/thrive for an exclusive offer of 20% off your first order. That's Thrive Causemetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength, Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner, by knockout, is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Okay, we are back with Jess Dobkin, and we're going to rewind a bit, as promised, to really unpack Jess's long history of radical performance art, activism, and lesbian visibility.
I didn't really come out until I was in university, but when I was in high school, I attended some support groups and events at Hedrick Martin in New York. And I think I was in high school really kind of grappling with my sexuality. And it was very confusing to me because at first it felt like the possibility of being a girl who liked girls, I just didn't understand how that could be. So it actually really, at that time, made me question my gender as well. And I remember being in high school and going with a friend to Provincetown and just having my mind completely blown because I had never really seen a space where lesbians were affectionate with each other in public. Even in New York, it was very rare at that time for me to see two lovers holding each other walking down the street. And I just remember seeing that for the first time and just beginning to imagine a future for myself. When I first came out to my family and they were like, oh no, your life is going to be terrible. And I was like, oh my God, actually my life is going to be incredible. I've always felt that way. It's just been such a gift to me. I feel so lucky to be queer.
I feel that way too. Yeah. I mean, I'm coming from a place of privilege and figuring that all out in the 2010s, but I always, I feel that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And same with me in terms of a lot of privilege in that, absolutely. So I'm just speaking of my own experience here because it was also a way for me to find community. When I was touring with my shows and it would be just show up at the gay bar in whatever city and you have 5 new friends. And it was just this way in which there was this kind of underground culture. But it feels important to say that activism of that time was also about community and about cruising. It was so integrated into, I'll say, my life in that the ways that we organized, the ways that we socialized, the ways that we dated and all of it were just really building, envisioning our ways and our culture together. And so when I think about the kiss-ins or the, all the other organizing that we did, it was also in the spirit of cruising. People would go to these meetings to fight the power and also to get laid, or to make friends or to be in conversation and in each other's company.
So you moved to New York after college and you immediately join ACT UP?
Yeah, I had been a little bit involved in ACT UP when I was in college. I was already involved in ACT UP.
What were some of the things you were doing with ACT UP or Lesbian Avengers?
I mean, with ACT UP, again, speaking of something that was all around us and not spoken, AIDS was not spoken. It wasn't spoken by the government. It wasn't being spoken by the media. So in ACT UP, just of bringing attention to the crisis. And so some of the actions that I was involved in were of civil disobedience, demonstrations around pharmaceuticals, around the NIH. I was part of a group that got arrested in Washington, D.C., disrupting a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting. In that case, it was Justice Souter during the process of him becoming a Supreme Court justice. So there's a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting that happens. And so a group of us came from New York to D.C. to protest inside at the hearing. So we weren't on the outside. We actually went in and we were just sitting in the audience. And then once we started standing on chairs and disrupting, intentionally disrupting the meeting, we were arrested. Also around this time, so in 1992, when I joined the Lesbian Avengers, and I also joined the Wow Cafe Theater in New York. And it still is on East 4th Street and is a sweat equity collective. There was no buzzer to the building, and WOW was on the 4th floor, and you'd have to stand on the sidewalk down below and holler up to the window and go, woo, woo. Someone would open the window on the 4th floor and drop the key down, and then you'd find the key on the sidewalk and let yourself into the building. One week you'd be working the box office for someone else's show or running lights or in someone's show. And then when you had the space to produce a project, you could do anything you wanted in that space, as long as you restored it when you were done. And for me, creatively, that was so exciting. And I was really compelled by performance as something that just had that immediacy, that sense of urgency, that being in real time and space with people, but kind of that integration of queer visibility and art making and activism all kind of coming together. It just felt like a really energetic time in terms of bringing people together to do just kind of wild things. I created a lesbian dinner theater called Eat Out, and the posters that I put around the East Village that had a photo of the cunt eating contest that was the end of the show. This was in 1997, and it was around Giuliani, I think, in terms of cleaning up New York and getting fined for putting posters around the city.
What was this dinner theater, and how did this cunt eating contest go down?
It was kind of like a pie eating contest that was a pie eating contest, if you know what I mean. And so there were the contestants at the table, and then the pies who were getting their cunts eaten out. And then when I was how are we going to know who the winner is? So I made a machine. I called it the monometer. And so it was we kind of evaluated the sounds that were being made by the people who are getting eaten out to determine who the winner was. So we served a dinner and had the performance. And then this was kind of the dessert. There were a whole bunch of performers, and some of the performers were either the contestants or the pies. And then I also would ask the audience, and people could come and assume either role. So it was both audience and performers who were part of that scene in the show.
And then you moved to Toronto in 2003?
2002.
Okay.
Yeah, so I moved to Canada for a relationship, and then Ontario legalized same-sex marriage. So I did a project going back to New York to test things out by marrying people and animals and objects and things. And that was also in response to this conservative kind of declaration that if gay people could marry, that marriage would get totally out of control and that it would just unleash this thing where people would start marrying their siblings and they would marry multiple people, like just this scare around what would happen with queer people getting married. So I decided to kind of enact that and let it get totally out of control.
And what did that look like?
It was at a festival at the Kitchen in New York. And I had marriage certificates that I had made and just kind of performed these like weddings on the street. And I just married as many people as I could meet that day. Yeah. And then I also created an online registry that didn't get me very far.
What do you mean? Like, what kind of registry?
A registry where people could buy me gifts for my weddings. I registered like a couple of department stores and made a list of things that I would want.
Okay, so when you say marrying, I was initially thinking of it as like you're conducting marriage ceremonies, but it was you personally marrying people,
I was the bride.
pets, objects.
Yeah. I officiated my own wedding, so I was the bride and I had a wedding dress.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have like a couple of your performances that I like just want to make sure that we talk about. That same year maybe or the next year is attending.
Mm-hmm. When I made that project, I was thinking a lot about just wanting to find my own joy in my performance making and just thinking about like what would I most want to do, what would make me happy. And that was to be a full service attendant in women's washrooms to meet people's needs. So I set myself up to do that. And I had menus inside the stalls and little bells that people could ring in case they needed me to do like tampon insertions or wipings or any other services they might require. And then I had my cart with toiletries and mints and things like that.
Was this sort of like roving? You would just kind of like pick a washroom and set up there?
I did it a few times and it was really interesting. I think this is always interesting for me about performance because of how much the context determines things of the performance. So I did it at the Queer Theater in Toronto. I did it at the Kitchen in New York. I did it at the Art Fair at the Metro Convention Center in Toronto, where there were some complaints by people using the washroom.
You don't have to order anything.
I know. I'm like, I'm here just to be of service. So yeah, some people didn't appreciate that. They just wanted to really be left alone.
You would get orders though, and you would be inserting tampons and wiping people.
When I was lucky, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then we have fee for service.
Mm-hmm. Fee for service was a performance where people could purchase a pencil for a nominal fee from someone who was working the front kind of desk, the reception desk, and then come behind the screen and I would sharpen the pencil for them or with them with a sharpener that was inserted in my vagina. And it was like a vagina dentata. So I kind of created like a kind of merkin mask for my vagina, for my cunt. And then once the pencil was sharpened and the person would leave, they would write a little note in a notebook with their sharpened pencil. And for me, that was kind of part of the exchange of something that I was giving and that they were giving back to me.
I know that was around the same time as the lactation station.
So the lactation station, I did that project after I gave birth. And at first I had intended, when I first conceived the project, that I would be the milk donor, but I wasn't able to. I wasn't producing milk to do it, which I think actually ended up being something that really became an asset for me for the performance, that I needed to ask donors to supply milk for the performance. And I spent time with each of the donors and interviewed them and talked with them about their experience of parenting, of breastfeeding. And then for the performance, I set up the bar, kind of like you would a wine tasting, but it was breast milk. And people would come and sit at the bar and do tastings. And I would impart kind of the stories of the donors. And I would kind of conduct a conversation with the tasters about what they were tasting and everything that it was kind of evoking for them. Like when they were tasting a certain donor's milk, I would kind of talk about things like what that donor had been eating a lot of, how that person's breastfeeding experience had been going. If the donor had tasted their own milk, I would talk about what the donor thought their milk tasted like. I also talked a bit about my own experience of breastfeeding. And then I would ask some questions to the tasters, and they would kind of share their experience both around the taste of the milk, but also the performance talked a lot about taste in terms of cultural taste and taboo, and talking about bodily fluids and intimacy and a lot of the other issues that were kind of raised by this proposal of tasting, the breast milk of a stranger.
And so it's kind of about like celebrating breast milk, destigmatizing it.
Yeah. It's interesting because for me, in a way, it was less about celebrating the milk and more kind of just talking about the incredible complexity of breast milk and the substance that is like a bodily fluid and a food, and at times like a fetish object, and something that tries to be regulated in terms of rules around breastfeeding in public, but also is this totally this substance that really can't be regulated. So in some ways it's about the milk, but it's also kind of about all of the questions that get raised and questions about risk, and also just the taste, because the milks taste remarkably different.
So this gained a lot of attention.
Yeah, it did. And it was interesting. Like the first time I did it was in Toronto, and public health got involved. And there was a question about whether they were going to allow the performance to happen. They were going to shut it down. And then what ended up happening is that they posted signs at the performance that just said that minors were not permitted to taste the breast milk.
Of all the restrictions.
No children can drink the milk, only adults. So that's how it was handled. And then part of what was interesting for me too is, again, in terms of context, I brought the project to Montreal, that's very different culturally than it is here in Toronto. And children were tasting the milk and were part of the conversation. It was amazing to have kids kind of articulating their thoughts and feelings about and experiences of the milk. I do feel like there's some connection for me around that, what was happening at WOW and what was happening in activism at that time, and it being a very brave space. When I think about Lisa at that kiss-in, that it's fun and sweet, and it's also a very courageous space to occupy. And I really felt that with the Avengers too, that it was very creative. There were incredible artists who were also creating visual materials. And I've continued to do wheat pasting here in Toronto and stickering. I really believe in that DIY audience of people who are just kind of unexpected to kind of come across something that isn't necessarily just to be confrontational. Questioning, kind of open a space for some.
Thanks for listening to Cruising. If you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps others discover our podcast. Cruising is produced by a small but mighty team of 3 queer women, Rachel Karp, Jen McGinnity, and me, your host and editor, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can support us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod. Follow us on social media at cruisingpod, on Substack, cruising.substack.com, and at our website, www.cruisingpod.com.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Tom.
Okay, so you want to tell him, or you want me to tell him?
No. I got this. I want people out there.
Yeah.
People, lean in. Get close. Listen, here's the deal.
We got big news.
We got monumental news. We got snacktacular news.
Yeah, after a brief hiatus, my good friend Michael Ian Black and I are coming back.
My good friend Tom Cavanaugh and I are coming back to do what we do best.
What we were put on this earth to do.
To pick a snack.
To eat a snack.
And to rate a snack.
Scientifically.
Emotionally.
Spiritually.
Mates is back.
Mike and Tom Eat Snacks is back.
A podcast for anyone with a mouth.
With a mouth. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi there, Fred Greenhalgh here, director of audio dramas like DC High Volume Batman and Star Trek Con. However, my one true love remains all things spooky, and I'm excited to say there's a new season of my horror podcast, Undertow. This season is called Familiar Haunts, standalone horror tales that reveal how the past is never truly gone, and humanity may be the most ruthless monster of them all. Here's a sample from the first episode about a man who returns to the house he grew up in after receiving a creepy voicemail from his mother. Let's hear it, shall we?
Mike, help me. I'm not alone in here. I'm not alone. She's walking. She's walking toward me.
Hear the rest by listening to Familiar Haunts, available on Undertow. Subscribe to Undertow wherever you get your podcasts, such as the app you're listening to me right now. In addition to the weekly releases of Familiar Haunts, we have 11 previous seasons with everything from werewolf tales to underwater monsters and creepy reincarnated twins. So get your spooky fix by subscribing to Undertow.